Hey guys, I know it's been a while before I've done another review, so I figured I might as well start it off with, well, okay, I'm acutely aware that this absolutely doesn't really count as a typical horror game, and that they're, even the movies, they have some elements of that, but they're not, what you would call classical horror. But I decided to bridge the gap between myself and my own interest between horror to kind of lead us into the whole Halloween thing, that's happening, because it is October, and it's Halloween spooky time, and I asked you guys what you wanted me to do, and there's some good ideas mixed in, and there's also some bad ideas. I mean, I'm not going to say which is which. I appreciate everybody who replied, though. Thank you for giving me some thoughts, because I really didn't know what I was going to do this year. It wasn't that long ago that I did the entire Resident Evil series. So, outside of the one dude who mentioned that I could do the original PlayStation versions of 2 and 3, which is a thought, that series is, just done. I mean, there are other games in the series I guess I could talk about, but I mean, in terms of the core games, there's not really much to go on. There is Silent Hill and stuff like that too, and maybe Fatal Frame. Fatal Frame is an interesting idea. But let's not go there right now. Let's stick with what we're talking about. Before we begin, thank you to all my patrons and channel members. I appreciate every single one of you. Don't forget that there's a bunch of links in the description regarding my Twitter and I've been posting a bunch of TikToks lately and things like that. A bunch of social media stuff, and I got a new podcast going on. That's a thing too. At the time of you watching this video, the second episode of that will probably be up in about, it'll be 6 a.m. Wednesday. I don't know when I'm going to upload this video. I don't know anything anymore. I just do this stuff. This is for you people, and I'm trying my best. Don't yell at me.
The game has been rigged. Forget all the rules. Stop believing what you're told. All this hate that I feel for you, my one true enemy. Once was blind, but now I see. It makes me question why.
Okay, so, now that we're onto that, Jurassic Park Trespasser. Wow. Okay, so where do we begin with Trespasser? I don't know where to begin. This game is... God, it's... Here's the deal with Trespasser. There's a history here. The developers of Trespasser were really pushing the envelope at the time with what you could do with a first-person survival game. And it's one of those situations where what they were trying to do was great, and had it worked, it would have been awesome. But the technology just wasn't ready. They didn't have enough time to implement it properly. It was new ground, and the tech just wasn't really up to it back then. In many ways, Trespasser is the precursor to a lot of modern physics games, such as Half-Life 2 or Portal or things like that. In fact, I'm pretty sure the developers of Half-Life Valve went on record saying that Trespasser was one of their influences in terms of adapting such a great physics engine into their game. Trespasser's big thing here was, while it is set in Jurassic Park, they also wanted to make it as real as possible, and part of that is having realistic objects and physics, where you can interact with a whole bunch of different things with realistic movements and weight, and there'd be, weight puzzles and things of that nature to establish into a survival type game. This is the kind of game that I've been wanting to see with Jurassic Park for a long time. I have gone on record before saying that there's been an idea in my head that it's never going to get made because I'm not a game developer, but it's an idea where I would love to play a proper survival horror game set up on one of the Jurassic Park islands. Make it dark, almost like Alien Isolation. That's a good example. Like that kind of, game where, you're stuck, you're trapped on this island all by yourself, and you gotta survive, and, there's dinosaurs everywhere. And in many ways, Trespasser was supposed to be the game I just described. The problem is a couple, twofold here. One thing is that the game is just simply not scary. It's almost comical in many cases. In concept, it's not that dissimilar though. You are taking control of a character named Anne who is involved in a plane crash, and she crashes upon Isla Sorna, Site B from the second and third movies. She has to get to the radio tower at the center of the island and attempt to call for help and make her escape from this horrible place. Of course, in her way are a whole bunch of dinosaurs that would like dearly to feast upon her delicious flesh. And you have to fend them off with a variety of different weapons, and by variety I mean guns. There are melee weapons in the game, but one of the big problems is that none of the melee weapons, for the most part, are really any good. You're gonna be using guns, which is weird to me because it was established in Jurassic Park 3, which to be fair was after this game was made, that there were no guns left on Isla Sorna. However, according to this game, there are just random guns everywhere. There's no reloading. Reloading isn't allowed here. Instead, you pick up a gun, you use it till it's exhausted, and then you pick up another gun. And there's just 87,000 guns just littered across Isla Sorna. Now, I can believe that there'd be some guns left over. Between the hunters in Lost World, as well as InGen themselves being on the island, they couldn't have gotten everything, but I do think the fact that there's a hilarious amount of guns just littered all over the place is just hysterical. It doesn't make any sense in that regard, but, you know, when they couldn't get the melee weapons working properly, I kind of get why this happened this way. In addition, I am ignoring the elephant in the room. Let's talk about that arm. Oh, Nelly, that arm! So, part of the idea with the realistic physics with Trespasser is that they have this arm where Anne can use her arm to, you know, reach around and pick up objects and, you know, aim and stuff, and it was meant to feel more real to immerse you in the situation. The problem is that the arm is really, really wonky, and honestly, I think it's kind of commendable they got it to work as well as it does, because it barely works at all. This thing is horrible. It is in no way an effective means to pick up things and control them in this way. This was before the days of VR. VR games now have, you know, different setups where you can actually control things with your actual arms, and the game will sense this. Even the Wii sort of had this idea with the Wii Motion Plus and doing something similar, but this was before any of that. This was on a PC with a mouse and keyboard. It doesn't work this way. As someone who's played it personally, I can tell you the arm is one of the most difficult things to get used to. There was a point in development, because you're probably wondering why she only has one arm, that was going to involve utilizing two arms, and that was a technical nightmare. It was just impossible, so they just went with one. And the non-story given reason that fans of the game kind of just agree on is that her other arm was broken in the plane crash, which is a good enough reason as any for why she can only use one, although I think it is absolutely hysterical that Anne is capable of just one-arming shotguns with basically no recoil. Like, that's impossible. No, I think many bodybuilders would have trouble doing that, let alone Anne here. I mean, you know, she seems pretty well built, you know, for the most part, but no, that's not how this works. Anne uses the arm for everything, grabbing objects, grabbing weapons, doing every conceivable possible thing. You have to use the arm for it. Once you get used to it, it's kind of an interesting idea, and you can see where they were going with it, and it does make the game very unique from a gameplay perspective, but it is by no means a good way of controlling the game, especially before the days of motion control and virtual reality and things like that. This just was before its time. But I did mention the physics engine, the realistic weight system and stuff like that, and in many ways, that part of the game actually works really well. Moving stuff around can be difficult, and it is mostly tied to the arm issue, but when you do it, putting objects on weights, balancing on them, sticking them on top of each other, it actually works in a very realistic way, especially for the time. It's technically impressive in that regard, and as a tech demo, I think the game is actually kind of good. The problem is that this was a retail release, and it was launched with a whole bunch of bugs, and did get some patches, and even some fan patches and fan mods later to try to make this, you know, thing somewhat playable. But playing it now, yeah, as a game that you pay, you drop money for, no, this is bad. From a storytelling perspective, I do have to commend it for something. They got Richard Attenborough, the guy who actually plays John Hammond in Jurassic Park, to do original voice acting for the game. He's meant to be reading his own words from his memoirs that Anne read prior to crashing on the island, coincidentally. But for a Jurassic Park fan like me, these, like, almost journal entries that you hear as Anne is exploring the island is some of the most incredible pieces of lore we've ever gotten. There's still a lot of mystery surrounding Site B in terms of the film canon, and even the book canon for that matter, but the game attempts to kind of be a side bridge into understanding what was really going on Site B on Isla Sorna when the dinosaurs were being created. In that element, it's a super interesting experience, and I adore it for this attempt. The fact that they got the man himself is amazing to me, and he does a terrific job introducing the lines. You get to explore certain parts of N-Gen's actual outposts here, their infrastructure, the abandoned stuff. The feelings of isolation are kind of there, although it's a bit dated by today's standards. The game's a bit too bright nowadays. I think that's one of the biggest problems. It kind of feels it being scary because, like, it's always daytime around here for whatever reason. Even though Anne should take at least a few days to traverse this island, it never seems to get dark. You never see her make camp or anything like that, so it kind of breaks the immersion in that regard. But another nice element is that there are a wealth of dinosaurs to encounter. From herbivores to carnivores, there aren't just raptors to fight. Thank you, Jurassic the Hunted, for making me bitter about raptors until the day I die. There are quite a lot of raptors though, but at least there are different tribes of raptors, each with different health meters and things like that. But there are also things like Albertosaurs and of course T-Rexes that you have to deal with, though oddly no Dilophosaurs that I noticed, which you'd think would be a given as those were in the first movie. Why does this series keep shafting Dilophosaurs? I don't get that. But there's also Triceratops and Stegosaurs and Brachiosaurs, though there is a major flub in the game. One of the journal entries for John Hammond's memoirs, he mentions that Brachiosaur is the only true Jurassic native. And while it is true that many of the dinosaurs in Jurassic Park are actually from the Cretaceous period, not the Jurassic period, the idea that Brachiosaur is the only Jurassic one is hideously wrong. Stegosaurs are also Jurassic, and they're in the game, so I don't know how they overlooked that. But it's a minor thing that I'm just nerding out about. Look, okay, so the question I suppose you have here now, so is this game good, Darkness? No! Why would you ask me that? That's ridiculous. Look at it. It's a hideous mess. It's a disaster of a game to play. But in a weird vein, it kind of enters a so bad it's kind of good situation, because you can desperately see what the developers were shooting for, and it is so ahead of its time in terms of what they were trying to do. It doesn't work. It doesn't. It's a clunky mess, but boy howdy did they give it the old college try here, and it influenced so many other good things we would have later. If you're in the right mindset and are interested in experiencing a bit of lost Jurassic Park lore, as well as a unique gameplay experience, because it definitely has that, I would almost say Trespasser is worth a play. Believe it or not, unlike a lot of bad games I talk about, Trespasser still has a dedicated fan base still making mods for the game to this day. I'm serious. People are actually well behind Trespasser. A lot of the fan patches fix many of the issues the game had, and playing a modded version can actually make it a pretty fun game to play. Most mods don't change the core mechanics because part of the experience is experiencing the whole noodle arm thing you got going on. And as weird as that is, it's distinctive, and it's a major part of what you get out of playing something like Trespasser. So I would say that if you're a Jurassic Park fan, or even want to play something unique, give Trespasser a shot purely out of curiosity. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you it's a good game. It isn't. But it can be some hilarious fun, and a good look at the kind of experimenting developers used to do before we got to modern graphics engines that make this kind of thing commonplace. We're spoiled nowadays, but in the 90s, this was an attempt at being cutting edge. It failed, but you gotta give it credit for trying. So with that, till next time, this is Darkness, and I bid you all a fond farewell.